Respect is not created through force, persuasion, or emotional pressure. It grows in the silent spaces where ego falls away. In relationships, especially romantic ones, this truth is often misunderstood. Many people believe that respect comes from how loudly they demand it or how firmly they assert their expectations. But real respect is born in a deeper place. It emerges when two people are able to step beyond the narrow walls of self-protection, pride, and insecurity. And for a woman understanding how a man operates, this principle becomes even more essential, because a man's ego is often the first layer she encounters, while his respect is hidden just behind it. Ego is loud. It speaks quickly. It reacts without thinking. A man's ego is built from years of conditioning, ideas of strength, dignity, independence, and identity. When he feels challenged, misunderstood, or emotionally vulnerable, the ego is the first to respond. It wants to protect him. It wants to keep him safe. It wants to avoid embarrassment, discomfort, or perceived weakness. This is why in moments of tension, a man may become defensive, distant, argumentative, or withdrawn. Not because he lacks feelings, but because his ego fears losing control. The woman who recognizes this begins to see the difference between his surface reactions and his deeper intentions. Respect begins where ego ends, because when ego steps aside, what remains is sincerity. Ego does not allow space for listening, understanding, or vulnerability. It only wants to win. It only wants to be right. But the moment ego softens, even slightly, a man becomes capable of hearing not just the words spoken to him, but the truth beneath them. This is why calmness, patience, and inner steadiness create such powerful impact. When a woman remains grounded in the presence of a man's ego-driven reactions, she is not feeding the fire. She is not escalating the noise. Instead, she becomes a mirror, a gentle reminder of what it looks like when someone is not controlled by emotional turbulence. A man deeply respects the woman who does not argue with his ego. Not because she is silent or passive, but because she sees beyond the temporary mask. She chooses presence over pressure. She does not match irritation with irritation. She does not rush to defend her worth. She does not collapse into insecurity. Instead, she stands with calm authority, allowing him the space to recognize his own imbalance. It is in that space that he realizes his behavior is not aligned with the person he wants to be. Respect grows from this realization because it is not something she demanded. It is something he arrived at internally. There is also a deeper dynamic at play. When a woman tries to force a man out of his ego, he resists. Force strengthens the very wall she is trying to break, but when she remains rooted in her center, not shaken by his emotional shifts, the wall loses its purpose. A man does not respect the person who pushes him while he is already defensive. He respects the person who remains steady enough to let him find his own clarity. This steadiness is not coldness. It is not a withdrawal of affection. It is the expression of emotional maturity, the ability to stay present without becoming entangled in temporary chaos. A man can feel this difference immediately. He may not articulate it, but it changes how he sees her. Respect also begins where ego ends because true connection requires humility. A man cannot fully respect someone if he is always competing with them, arguing with them, or trying to prove something. But when ego dissolves, even for a moment, he becomes aware of his own humanity. He becomes aware of hers. He begins to understand that strength is not about overpowering, but about aligning, communicating, and being honest. The woman who creates the environment where this shift can happen, through calm presence and unwavering self-respect, becomes someone he holds in high regard. She becomes a reference point for emotional balance. She becomes the person who reminds him of who he wants to be, not through criticism but through her example. When ego ends, respect deepens because there is finally room for truth. A man begins to see the woman not as someone triggering him, but as someone supporting his growth. He sees that her patience is not weakness but wisdom. He recognizes that her calmness is not indifference but understanding. And he starts to admire the way she can hold space without collapsing into reaction. This admiration subtly transforms the dynamic between them. He speaks to her differently. He listens differently. He behaves differently, not out of fear, but from genuine respect. This principle also reveals something important about self-respect. A woman who is anchored in her worth does not need to fight for validation. She does not need to match the intensity of a man's ego. Her presence already communicates her values. Her boundaries already speak for her. And because she is not operating from her own ego, she is able to respond with clarity rather than impulse. This creates a powerful dynamic. When one person lets go of ego, the other person often follows. Ultimately, respect flows in the direction of stability. A man respects the woman who can stand in the eye of the storm without losing herself. He respects the woman who can see his ego without reacting to it. He respects the woman who invites him to rise, not through demands, but through presence, awareness, and inner strength. In that space, ego fades and respect naturally takes its place. Consistency is one of the quiet forces that shape how people perceive one another, yet it is often overlooked because it lacks the excitement of grand gestures or dramatic declarations. Words can be poetic, emotional, persuasive, or are comforting, but they are still only possibilities. Words describe intention, but consistency reveals truth. In relationships, especially those touched by uncertainty or emotional depth, consistency becomes the most reliable measure of character. It shows who someone truly is when the noise of emotional highs and lows fades. It shows what remains when excitement, attraction, or pressure no longer dictate behavior. A person's words can create a moment, but their consistency creates a pattern. And a pattern tells the story that words cannot. This is why men, in particular, respect consistency more than promises. They watch behavior, they observe alignment. They pay attention to whether someone's actions reflect what they claim to value. For many men, trust is not built through emotional expression alone. It is built through witnessing the same qualities repeated over time. When someone speaks beautifully but behaves unpredictably, the inconsistency becomes louder than anything they have said. But when someone speaks simply and behaves steadily, trust forms naturally, without effort or persuasion. Consistency reveals truth because it exposes intention without performance. Anyone can act loving when everything feels easy. Anyone can be attentive when they want something. Anyone can be responsible for a short burst of time. But consistency tests the foundation. It shows whether someone acts from impulse or from principle. It reveals whether their behavior is rooted in momentary desire or in genuine character. A person who is consistent does not need to convince you of their reliability. You feel it. You sense it in the subtle way they show up, the way they communicate, the way they follow through on small commitments, even when no one is watching. There is a quiet confidence that grows when you witness consistency in another person. It makes you relax your nervous system. It makes you let go of fear. It makes you trust their presence. And trust is built in daily repetitions, not in dramatic words said once. This is why people who move with consistency often appear more powerful than those who speak passionately. Their power lies not in intensity, but in dependability. The world becomes unpredictable, emotions shift, challenges arise, and yet a consistent person remains grounded in their values. That steadiness is what gives their presence weight. A woman who moves with consistent values earns a man's respect in a way that words alone cannot achieve. When she says she values self, respect, and then demonstrates it in her choices, he notices. When she says she will not tolerate certain behaviors and then quietly distances herself when they occur, he understands. When she speaks kindly and continues to speak kindly even during conflict, he feels the depth of her emotional maturity. Her consistency becomes her credibility. Without raising her voice, without arguing, without seeking validation, she teaches him who she is through repetition. He realizes she is not acting, she is living her values. And that realization shifts his behavior. Conversely, inconsistency weakens respect rapidly. When someone speaks of boundaries but does not uphold them, their words lose weight. When someone promises honesty but becomes selectively truthful, trust dissolves. When someone claims they are ready for connection but repeatedly disappears, their own actions reveal their unreadiness. This is not about perfection, it is about alignment. It is about the distance between what someone says and what they do. The wider that distance grows, the more a relationship loses its grounding. Consistency also reveals truth within oneself. It exposes where your intentions are strong and where they are still fragile. The habits you repeat become the person you are, not the ideals you imagine. When someone chooses consistency in self-respect, growth, patience, or discipline, they begin to shape their life in a direction that feels predictable, not in a boring way, but in a stable way. And stability is one of the greatest signs of inner strength. It is the quiet knowledge that you do not need to prove who you are. You simply act in alignment, Day after day, regardless of how emotions fluctuate, there is also a spiritual dimension to consistency. It brings clarity. When someone behaves the same way in moments of peace and in moments of stress, it reveals their true nature. When someone remains respectful even when they are angry, it reveals their depth of character. When someone shows up during difficulty with the same sincerity they show during joy, it reveals their loyalty. Consistency strips away illusions. It dissolves confusion. It shows you exactly who someone is without them needing to explain themselves. And in relationships, it becomes the compass you navigate by. People trust what they can predict. A predictable heart is not boring. It is safe. It is someone who will not betray themselves in a moment of weakness or betray you in a moment of pressure. A consistent presence becomes a source of grounding for those around them. Even in silence, even without effort, their steadiness radiates security. In the end, consistency becomes the deepest language of truth. Words create connection, but consistency sustains it. Words promise, but consistency fulfills. Words can disguise intentions, but consistency reveals them. Anyone can say the right things, but only a person in alignment can live them repeatedly, without performance, without manipulation, without the need for applause. Consistency is the quiet rhythm that shows the difference between intention and integrity, between desire and devotion, between emotion and character. Boundaries are often misunderstood because they are quiet. They do not shout for attention. They do not demand recognition. They do not try to convince anyone of their importance. Yet within their silence lies a strength that defines the quality of every connection a person forms: romantic, emotional, professional, or spiritual. Boundaries are the invisible architecture of self-respect. They are not walls meant to keep people out, but lines meant to keep you centered. And the more a person understands themselves, the more naturally their boundaries begin to form. Boundaries are silent strength because they do not require confrontation to exist. They do not depend on anger to be expressed. They form from clarity, not from fear. A person with strong boundaries knows who they are, what they value, what they will allow, and what they must release. They understand that the greatest form of protection is not aggression but awareness. They recognize that their energy is not limitless, their time is not infinite, and their emotional space is not something to be given to those who cannot hold it with care. Their boundaries are not defensive, they are deliberate. In relationships, boundaries become a quiet compass. They guide interactions without needing to be announced. A woman who honors her boundaries does not have to repeat them constantly. Her actions communicate what her words do not. When something feels misaligned, she steps back. When someone disrespects her, she redirects her energy. When a man begins to take her presence for granted, she does not chase, plead, or negotiate. She simply withdraws into her center, and that shift alone becomes the message. A man may not understand it immediately, but he feels it. He senses that her energy is not accessible without intention or respect, and because she does not dramatize her boundaries, they hold even more weight. Silent boundaries are powerful because they do not try to control others, they protect oneself. There is a difference. Boundaries that are shouted often come from insecurity or fear of losing control, but boundaries that are lived come from inner stability. They are not reactive, they are responsive. They are the result of self-awareness, not self-defense. A person with silent strength does not need to justify their decisions. They do not need to explain why they will not tolerate disrespect. They do not need to argue when someone crosses a line. They simply remove themselves, redirect their attention, or change their participation. Their actions communicate truth more clearly than any long explanation ever could. A man respects silent boundaries more than loud ultimatums because silence leaves no space for argument. It leaves no space for negotiation. Silence says, "This is who I am." Silence says, "I know my value." Silence says, "I do not need to prove anything to be treated the way I deserve." A man may challenge spoken rules, but he cannot challenge a woman's lived standard. When she embodies her boundary, he is confronted not by her voice, but by her self-respect. And self-respect is something he instinctively recognizes. Silent boundaries also dismantle ego-driven behavior. When someone attempts to push, provoke, or manipulate, a loud response fuels the fire. But silence removes the oxygen. It leaves no reaction to feed on. It creates a pause, a space where the other person naturally becomes aware of their own behavior. Silent strength does not seek to punish, it seeks to listen inwardly. It asks, What does this situation require of me to remain whole? That question leads to decisions that protect emotional space without diminishing compassion or presence. Boundaries are also powerful because they reveal compatibility. When someone cannot accept your boundaries, they reveal their limitations, not yours. When someone pushes against your boundaries, they show their relationship with control, respect, and emotional maturity. And when someone honors your boundaries with ease, they show their capacity for healthy connection. Boundaries, therefore, become a filter. They reveal who belongs in your inner world and who is not ready to be there. In a deeper sense, boundaries are a spiritual practice. They require awareness of self-worth, understanding of emotional patterns, and courage to act in alignment rather than in fear. They require letting go of the need to be liked or validated. They require trusting that protecting your own well-being does not make you selfish, but conscious. Boundaries are not a barrier to love. They are what allow love to be given safely. Without them, love becomes tangled with sacrifice, confusion, or resentment. But with them, love has clarity, structure, and direction. Silent boundaries also teach others how to treat you without you ever needing to explain. People learn through experience, not instruction. When you consistently remove yourself from disrespect, people learn that disrespect does not grant access to you. When you refuse to engage in emotional games, people learn that your energy cannot be manipulated. When you stay calm in the face of chaos, people learn that you are not controlled by external storms. Over time, your boundaries become a language others must understand if they want to be in your life. In relationships with men, silent strength becomes especially influential. Men often respond more to what is demonstrated than to what is spoken. They respect clarity, firmness, and emotional steadiness. When a woman holds her boundaries without hostility, she becomes someone a man instinctively respects. Her presence commands alignment. Her energy does not ask for effort. It requires it. And a man who recognizes her boundaries understands that her respect must be earned, not assumed. Boundaries are silent strength because they do not seek to change others. They protect the self. They do not need to be loud because their power lies in their consistency. They are not about exclusion, but about preservation. And the more a person honors their boundaries, the more their life aligns with peace, clarity, and meaningful connection. Detachment is often misunderstood. Many assume it means caring less, withdrawing affection, or becoming emotionally cold. But true detachment is none of these things. It is not the absence of emotion. It is the presence of inner stability. It is the ability to hold space for connection without becoming consumed by it. It is the discipline of loving without losing oneself. And because it is so rare, so difficult, and so deeply rooted in self-awareness, detachment creates a kind of gravity, an invisible pull that others feel instinctively. Detachment creates gravity because it communicates that your center is not dependent on another person's behavior. When someone sees that you do not collapse when they pull away, that you do not panic when they become distant, that you do not chase when attention fades, they begin to recognize a strength that is not loud but unmistakable. It is the strength of someone who has learned to regulate their own inner world. Someone who does not hand over their emotional balance so easily. Someone who is not controlled by hope, fear, or insecurity. This steadiness creates a powerful attraction because people naturally gravitate toward what is grounded. In relationships, attachment often becomes confused with connection. Many believe that the more they cling, the more they prove love. But clinging suffocates connection. It creates dependence instead of depth. Detachment allows space to breathe, and in that space, desire grows. A person may not know why, but they feel drawn to someone who is not anxiously waiting for approval or validation. They feel drawn to someone who can enjoy connection, but does not spiritually collapse when faced with uncertainty. That centeredness radiates a quiet confidence. And confidence always creates gravity. Detachment is not disconnecting, it is discerning. It is the ability to recognize when energy is no longer being reciprocated and to step back without anger. It is the ability to let someone move freely without trying to control the outcome. It is the ability to trust that if something belongs to you, it will move toward you, not away from you. The person who can hold this perspective becomes magnetic because they demonstrate emotional maturity. They show that their sense of self is not fragile. They show that they can feel deeply without being ruled by those feelings. And people respect that even if they do not fully understand it. A woman who practices detachment creates a powerful shift in how a man perceives her. She does not chase him when he withdraws. She does not over-explain herself when he becomes silent. She does not pressure him for a response or a commitment. She simply observes the situation with clarity and moves in accordance with what she sees, not what she fears. When he pulls away, she does not pursue, she recenters. When he delays, she does not wait helplessly, she continues her life. When he becomes inconsistent, she does not cling. She matches the energy and lets absence create its own awareness. In that calm detachment, a man feels something unusual. He feels his own energy shifting. He feels the absence of emotional pressure. He feels the weight of his own choices. And suddenly, he begins to see her differently. Not as someone he can drift in and out of, but as someone whose presence is earned by intention. Her detachment becomes the mirror that reflects his behavior back at him. And in that reflection, he sees whether he is acting with integrity or avoidance. This creates gravity because detachment makes a person unmistakably self-contained. Their emotional world is not leaking out, seeking to attach to anything that offers comfort. Instead, they hold themselves with internal discipline. People respect those who can hold themselves. People trust those who can stay calm. People gravitate toward those whose presence feels balanced and self-sustaining. Detachment also reveals the difference between desire and dependency. Dependency asks, who will complete me? Desire asks, who aligns with me? Dependency clings even when the connection is draining. Desire chooses only what enriches the inner world. Detachment is the gateway between these two states. It teaches you to release the need to control outcomes and instead trust the natural movement of connection. When someone feels this from you, they sense freedom rather than pressure. Freedom draws people closer because it allows them to approach willingly, not fearfully. There is a quiet power in knowing that you can walk away when necessary. You do not threaten it. You do not weaponize it. You simply know it. And that knowing creates a sense of inner gravity. The other person senses that their access to you is not guaranteed. They sense that their presence must be matched with effort. They sense that you choose them, not because you need them, but because you value the connection. And there is nothing more powerful than being chosen by someone who does not need to choose anyone at all. In truth, detachment is the practice of returning to yourself. It is the practice of grounding your energy, withdrawing your projections, reclaiming your emotions, and letting life move without forcing it. It is the quiet reassurance that whatever is meant for you will align with you naturally. And the moment you embody that truth, you stop chasing what is moving away and begin attracting what is meant to stay. This is why detachment creates gravity. It creates a presence that is not dependent, not frantic, not insecure. It creates a calm center that others feel drawn toward because it offers what most people lack, inner stability. And when someone stands in their stability with quiet confidence, they become a force in any relationship, not through effort, but through their very being. Self-respect is the foundation upon which all meaningful influence is built. Many people mistake influence for persuasion, for charisma, or for the ability to speak powerfully. But true influence does not come from external performance. It comes from an internal alignment so strong that others feel it without needing explanation. When a person respects themselves deeply, unapologetically, and consistently, they carry a presence that affects how others treat them, speak to them, approach them, and value them. Self-respect is the quiet force that shapes every interaction long before a single word is spoken. Self-respect is the root of influence because it determines your standards. When someone honors their inner world, they naturally raise the level of what they accept in their outer world. This does not require confrontation or demands. It does not require arguing for worth or proving value. It simply shows up in the choices they make. A person with self-respect moves differently, responds differently, and participates differently. They do not chase what diminishes them. They do not settle for halfway efforts. They do not tolerate inconsistency disguised as affection. Their standards speak with more clarity than their voice ever could. And others feel this. Influence is not created by insisting on being treated well. It emerges when others recognize that you would rather stand alone than be treated poorly. People instinctively gravitate toward those who demonstrate this kind of inner certainty. They trust those who value themselves because such people are less likely to manipulate, cling, or collapse under pressure. Self-respect creates stability And stability creates influence. In relationships, self-respect becomes a magnetic force. A woman with strong self-respect does not waver based on a man's attention or distance. She does not lose herself in attachment, nor does she shrink to maintain connection. Her presence remains steady, grounded, and clear. This steadiness affects a man profoundly. He senses that her value does not fluctuate based on external circumstances. He senses that her worth is not dependent on his approval. This shifts how he sees her. She becomes someone he instinctively wants to show up for because he realizes her energy is not something easily accessed or taken for granted. Self-respect teaches others how to treat you. People learn through experience, not through instruction. When you consistently show that you will not remain where you are dishonored, others understand that your boundaries are real. When you speak with kindness but do not allow disrespect, they understand your balance. When you offer love but never sacrifice your dignity, they understand the depth of your strength. Each of these moments becomes a silent lesson in what you expect, what you value, and what you refuse to accept. Influence is created in this quiet consistency. But self-respect also reveals the truth about influence. You cannot guide others if you are unstable within yourself. Influence is not about controlling outcomes or shaping someone else's behavior. It is about embodying a standard so clearly that people naturally adjust when they enter your space. Self-respect creates this adjustment effortlessly. It communicates without a single word that your presence is not dependent on external validation. And because you stand firmly in your center, you become a reference point for others, an example of groundedness in a world full of emotional chaos. People sense the difference between someone who respects themselves and someone who pretends to. Self-respect is not loud. It is not dramatic. It does not seek attention or praise. It reveals itself in quiet decisions, the way you speak to yourself, the way you honor your time, the way you detach from what drains you, the way you invest in what nourishes you. These decisions shape your energy, and energy is the true language of influence. In relationships, a person with self-respect becomes far more influential than someone who tries to gain power through pressure or emotional intensity. Influence rooted in insecurity is fragile. Influence rooted in self-worth is effortless. A woman who stands in her self-respect influences a man not through fear, but through inspiration. He wants to be better, not because she demands it, but because she reflects a version of himself he genuinely wishes to rise toward. This kind of influence creates transformation rather than resistance. It pulls instead of pushes. It invites instead of insists. Self-respect also creates clarity. When you respect yourself, you stop engaging in situations that blur your peace. You stop negotiating your boundaries. You stop accepting half love disguised as effort. This clarity influences others because they begin to understand the way you operate. They know where you stand, and therefore, they know where they must stand if they want to remain connected to you. Influence is strongest when it comes from someone who does not waver. When your self-respect stays constant, others adjust their behavior to meet it, or they drift away, revealing exactly what needed to be revealed. There is also a spiritual dimension to self-respect. It is the expression of inner alignment. When you respect yourself, you honor the energy given to you. You honor your intuition, your emotional needs, your mental space, your physical well-being. This alignment creates a kind of glow, an aura that others feel even in silence. People trust those who are aligned because alignment radiates authenticity. And authenticity, more than anything else, builds influence that lasts. It is the kind of influence that is not shaken by rejection, absence, or misunderstanding. It is rooted too deeply for that. Self-respect becomes the root of influence because it transforms you into someone who does not need external validation to feel whole. And when you no longer seek approval, your presence becomes more powerful. You speak from clarity rather than insecurity. You act from intention rather than fear. You give without losing yourself. You walk away without collapsing. And you live from a place where influence is not something you try to create. It is something you naturally embody. Calmness is often misunderstood. Many assume it is softness, passivity, or the absence of emotion. But in reality, calmness is one of the most potent forms of power a person can cultivate. It is not the lack of emotion. It is the mastery of emotion. It is not silence born from fear, but stillness born from understanding. And when someone carries this kind of calmness, It unsettles others not because it is threatening, but because it reveals something rare, a mind that is no longer controlled by impulse, noise, or chaos. Calmness is a form of authority that does not need volume to be heard. It does not need force to be felt. Its presence alone shifts the atmosphere. It slows down conversations, cools heated tempers, and exposes the unnecessary weight in situations people normally react to without thinking. When someone stands in calmness, they show that they are no longer governed by external energy. They choose their actions from clarity, not reactivity, and that makes their presence difficult to ignore. In a world that encourages speed, immediacy, and emotional outbursts, calmness disrupts the pattern. It challenges the rhythm of conflict and confusion. Most people expect reactions. They expect anger, defensiveness, or urgency. But when they are met with calmness, their assumptions collapse. They lose the predictable pattern of cause and effect. Suddenly, they are forced to face the situation without the drama they were preparing for. That is why calmness is unsettling. It removes the familiar chaos that many rely on to navigate life. Calmness reveals a person who has learned not to give their energy away cheaply. It shows discipline, restraint, and presence. Rather than being pulled by every emotion, they have learned to observe emotions without becoming them. They may feel anger, but they do not allow anger to dictate their actions. They may feel fear, but they do not collapse under it. They may feel pressure, but they do not allow pressure to distort their judgment. This level of inner control creates a gravitational pull around them. Others instinctively feel it. They sense that this person does not break easily, does not get manipulated easily, and does not lose themselves easily. Calmness is also a mirror. When others interact with someone who remains grounded, they are forced to see parts of themselves they often avoid. The one who reacts impulsively becomes aware of their own lack of control. The one who speaks too quickly becomes conscious of their own scattered thoughts. The one who thrives on conflict begins to feel visible in their agitation. Calmness exposes imbalances, and people feel this exposure not as judgment, but as a contrast to their own inner noise. To carry calmness is to walk with patience, not because time is slow, but because you no longer rush against it. It is to speak with intention, not because you have nothing to say, but because you refuse to waste words. It is to move with awareness, not because you fear mistakes, but because you understand that everything you do creates an echo. Calmness sharpens perception. You begin to notice things others overlook: the tension behind a person's smile, the insecurity behind their bravado, the truth behind their excuses. It gives you the space to respond from wisdom, not emotion. Calmness also transforms relationships. Arguments become unnecessary because you stop trying to win them. You listen differently. You observe differently. You become unaffected by emotional storms that once pulled you off center. This doesn't make you distant. It makes you stable. And stability is rare in human connections. People naturally gravitate toward what feels grounded. They trust it. They feel safe around it. They respect it. But calmness must not be confused with indifference. Indifference is rooted in apathy. Calmness is rooted in mastery. Indifference disconnects you from life. Calmness allows you to move through life with clarity. Indifference numbs emotion. Calmness organizes emotion. True calmness is alive. It is awake. It is sensitive but not fragile. It feels everything, but it collapses under nothing. To develop this kind of calmness requires practice. It requires watching your thoughts without reacting to them immediately. It requires breathing through moments that once triggered you. It requires letting silence fill the spaces you once rushed to control. It requires stepping back from situations that attempt to provoke you and choosing not to give them more power than they deserve. Calmness is not built in easy moments. It is built in the moments where chaos tries to reclaim you. When you adopt calmness as a way of moving through the world, you no longer need to prove your strength. Your presence becomes the proof. You no longer need to react to every challenge. Your silence becomes the response. You no longer need to match anyone's noise. Your stillness becomes the standard. Calmness becomes your shield and your language. It becomes the force that guides you through situations with steadiness that others cannot imitate because it cannot be faked. It must be lived.